Hey there, folks. Sorry, caught me during my morning cup of joe. Well, welcome back to another episode of Remembering the Poets with Josh. This week we're going to talk about one of my favorite writers, Alexander Pope. We're going to go about the life, the body, and the work of this great man. Born in the late 1600s to early 1700s, this man rose from ill-fated childhood to global stardom in a matter of no time. Sit back, relax, grab yourself a cup of joe, and enjoy this show. I know I will. At only 4'6", Alexander grew up in late 1600s London in a Protestant-run society, Catholic parents, Alexander Pope Sr. and Edith. He was a funny-looking feller, hunchback due to a condition known as Pott's disease. Pott's was a form of tuberculosis that led to the curvature of the back and some breathing complications. Boy, did he find a way to grow out of that mess. He was taught to read at a young age by his aunt and attended Catholic school when he was only 10 years old. Although Catholic schools were illegal, they were tolerated in some areas. Back at this time, it wasn't the easiest livings being a Catholic in a Protestant-dominated London. This led to many issues. Alienation of Catholics within a 10-mile radius of the great city. This rule forced old Alex and his folks to the outskirts to a place called Windsor Forest. With this action, Pope had to cease his education in the classroom, and he took it upon himself to do a little self-teaching. Something I surely wouldn't have had the motivation doing, to be honest. Taking online classes are hard enough for me as it is. But anyways, let's get back to Pope. Growing in the countryside, he was conflicted by his disease. His doctor prescribed him daily workouts, healthy diets, and some good old bike riding. And sure enough, that worked. Funny you need a PhD to prescribe things like that, but anywho, finding interest in poetry and writing, came into contact with England scholars such as William Trumbull, William Walsh, Samuel Garth, William Wesherley, and William Congreve. He not only was making friends, but he was taking their advice, excelling in his writings and career. While most youngins of his time are fooling around outside and are concerned with Pop Goes the Weasel, Pope is focused and concentrated on his poetry. He takes a shot at different styles and forms and goes through a period of finding himself. In 1711, he published his breakthrough piece called An Essay of Criticism. This was written in the style of heroic couplets. Interestingly enough, this piece criticizes poets and literary works of his time, gaining huge popularity in doing so. This is only a foreshadowing link to the rest of his work. Soon to follow came Pope's most famous work known as Rape of the Lock. Not only does this title grab your attention, it's a way for Pope to integrate the sexual tendencies of his time into this work. The Rape of the Lock was a mock epic poem. It takes a very trivial moment and turns it into World War III. Well, I guess it'd be World War I at that time, but you get what I'm saying. I'd like to briefly analyze the piece, seeing as it shows so much of Pope's character in doing so. In a nutshell, the poem is about a notable woman named Belinda, who lives in a materialistic world that I'm sure many of us can relate to today. She's surrounded by luxury and wealth, and takes it upon herself as she's the focal point of the universe. A gentleman approaches her at an elegant gathering and cuts a lock of her hair off, leading to a ridiculous battle. This quarrel was made very public, and Pope was asked to write on this matter to provoke revenge. Instead of doing so, it showed a mockery of the situation and better raised social issues of the time. While the country is dealing with economic, religious, and growth issues, why should we be wasting our time on trivial pursuits such as lost hair? Nonetheless, he was very satirical in this piece. It certainly wasn't his harshest. More is to come. During this time of introduction to the notable Literary Society of London, Pope returns to London and is highly respected among peers and friends. After The Rape of the Lock, he wrote another hit known as Eloisa de Abelard. This was more of a psychodrama and wasn't near as popular as Rape the Lock, but still made its mark. Pope tried to instill many of his own beliefs and issues in society with his satirical writing, gaining a different kind of follower than Shakespeare. Pope's work had a very thought-provoking process to it, and you couldn't find that attitude more clear than his poem on Essay of a Man. It describes the faults and treasures of a man and shows one's success through conscious thought and working in harmony. Rather than touching on specifics of a man's inner thinkings, he describes more of a universal approach to reasons and those actions and consequences. It shows the relation of God and humans, and details how we truly can know what God wants without us knowing His purposes. This essay, like Rape of the Lock, was written in heroic couplets and was highly recognized by the famous author Voltaire. Pope went on to translate the famous works of Homer with his renditions of the Iliad and the Odyssey. This was inspired and provoked by his good friend Swift, and led to a very literary success. In doing so, his project translating the Iliad was a 7-year process and was markedly and physically responsible. He released portions of this writing once a year, giving more suspense to the eager and reader individual. This was a neoclassical approach to an era that was plagued by Romanticism. Pope had to realize he was ahead of his time, and his styles and verbalism forced him to tweak his writing so people could understand what he was talking about. Several hundred years later, and sometimes I don't even know what the man's saying. Interestingly enough, the Dunciad was another great piece of work that was a satirical success, poking fun at the Iliad and Virgil, hinting the name the Dunciad. This 3-part book was started in 1728 and finished in 1743. He spent more time on writing than I did growing this mustache, which I thought took a long time. Another heroic couplet, this work heavily criticized the printing press and can be related to this day, in time of our youth being addicted to phones and technology. Just the same, Pope thought this would have an adverse effect on society. That doing so, just the contrary, has actually had an effect on Pope's popularity, and printing press made more publications available to the public, steering people away from rhyming styles of his own. Talking of the Dunciad and the life of Pope himself, which he was a large critic of artists working for profit, which interestingly enough was quite profitable during his time, he felt that writers shouldn't write for money, but yet for the passion of the art. Pope's later life was endured with his mother. He spent many of his later moments in the countryside. His influences on his era were monumental, and his presence in today's literary world speaks volumes. I hope you've enjoyed talking about the great works of old Pope just as much as I have. I'd love to talk more about this man's legacy, but unfortunately work is calling. Until next time, keep drinking Joe, keep reading. Don't forget, tune in next week. I'll reveal Jane Austen's darkest secrets. Thanks for watching Remembering the Poets with Josh. See you next time.